Do you like what I'm doing with my hands? Is this what a good intro looks like? Perfect! Don't worry, darling, I'm definitely not going insane. And here I am talking about Don't Worry Darling because I've read so many incredibly stupid things online that I just had to say something.
How do you know what's good for me? That's my opinion!
People were either still stuck on the controversy and the backstage news when it comes to Olivia Wilde's relationship with Shia LaBeouf and what she said about this person and this other person. Who gives a fuck at the end of the day? Who gives a fuck? Because the movie was actually incredibly good.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to be back in New York. I just popped very quickly to Venice to spit on Chris Pine.
Or they were comparing it to things like The Matrix, and I was sitting there being like, it is nothing like The Matrix when it comes to its visual style, when it comes to the performances, when it comes to the tone, or even all the visual references that Olivia Wilde was using when it comes to America in the 50s. So I had to say something. I had to come here, sit in front of this camera, and actually give you my thoughts on Don't Worry Darling, because I think it is definitely one of the best movies of this year. And when I was writing my review, I actually wrote down something that goes along the lines of, this is literally what I wanted Nope to be this year. I'm gonna start by giving you my spoiler-free thoughts when it comes to this film, and then I'm gonna get into spoilers because there's a lot of interesting things that Olivia Wilde explores with this movie here, whether it is different messages, different themes, or even visually speaking. So I had to spoil the fuck out of this movie, otherwise there would be nothing to talk about.
I've been waiting for someone like you, someone to challenge me. Like a good girl.
When it comes to the spoiler-free review though, what I will say is that if you really enjoyed Jordan Peele's Get Out, for example, you will really enjoy this movie. If you enjoyed Midsommar, for example, I feel like Don't Worry Darling has the same kind of pacing when it comes to, you know that something is wrong, but you don't know exactly what is going on, and there are different flashes and episodes which keep going on top of each other until the main character goes completely insane. This movie also reminds me of that movie with Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg, of which the title escapes me at the moment. So the idea of being stuck in a really weird dystopian suburban environment and being forced to live a life that really doesn't align with your own beliefs or even the beliefs of our contemporary society nowadays. Visually speaking, I think this is definitely one of Olivia Wilde's best movies. I mean, she's directed 2 movies, so of course. Even when it comes to the editing, I could really feel it in Booksmart as well, which was her directorial debut. Wilde really has a good grasp of pacing and timing, whether it is comedic timing or whether it is tension as well.
Wait, Miss Fine, I thought there were no cell phones allowed in class. Or are there exceptions for ass kissers?
Hey, $1 in the swear jar.
I'm so sorry, these shorts, they don't have pockets.
Okay, excuse me.
She knows how to frame a scene, how to keep the camera there for as long as it needs to, and she also knows when to cut away. She knows when to use a long take instead of the kind of rapid fire shot editing that you could see in movies like Requiem for a Dream. And you could really see that in Booksmart within all the different montage sequences. But this movie here really proves that Booksmart wasn't just a fluke, it wasn't just a chance, that it was so incredibly good and relatable and well written and also memorable. I mean, I've seen Booksmart like 5 times at the very least.
I know this is unrealistic and bad for women, but is it bad? Because I feel pretty good. I mean, this ass won't quit. Amy, use your brain! I don't need to use my brain, I just need to be smooth and flexible.
This movie also reminds me of other mediocre movies that have tried to exploit the same concept, things like Antebellum, for example, which came out a couple of years ago. Just to say that this film here really exploits the premise to its absolute potential, and it is never boring, it is always exciting, and it has incredible performances as well. Florence Pugh, of course, is incredible. We saw it in Midsommar. We even saw it in Black Widow, where she really showed her comedic chops.
Yeah, that's what happens when the Red Room gives you an involuntary hysterectomy. They kind of just go in and they rip out all of your reproductive organs. They just get right in there and they chop them all away. everything out.
Okay.
So you can't have
Okay,
babies.
you don't have to get so clinical and nasty.
Oh, well, I was about to talk about fallopian tubes.
But I was actually surprised to see a really serious role for Chris Pine, who is incredibly creepy in this film here, and he really represents a lot of weird patriarchal, sexist ideas and ways of behaving.
I'd say it's certainly
And I was also incredibly surprised by Harry Styles. Very often when we tend to cast these kind of pop stars, or we tend to cast these models or celebrities who just look really good and have an incredible following. You could think about Cara Delevingne, for example, or you could think about Lady Gaga within certain movies, because Lady Gaga is actually a good actress at the end of the day. But just the idea of casting these kind of people, you don't really expect a lot of them. But I was actually really surprised when it comes to Harry Styles' performance. He was incredibly charming, but also really creepy when the script needed him to be creepy.
We men, we ask a lot.
Can't you see?
We ask for strength, food at home, a house cleaned,
With you all the time.
and discretion above all else.
And I really enjoyed seeing him suffering, and I really enjoyed seeing him shout and try to get at the same level as Florence Pugh, because I'm pretty sure that that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to be as serious as possible, as believable as possible. When it comes to the sex scenes, there were so many different rumors going around, and the audience seemed to be so incredibly obsessed about them. And at the end of the day, the sex scenes are nothing special. So if you want to watch that film specifically for that reason, I don't really recommend it. If you do want to watch a psychological drama that reminds me of the stuff of Jordan Peele or even Ari Aster, that's why you should seek out this movie. Now, let's move into spoiler territory. Because there's a lot of things that I want to talk about, and I can't even address the themes that this movie is going through without spoiling the movie. So people who are actually criticizing this movie because it looks like so many other simulation movies like The Matrix, for example, don't really understand the fact that this story is being told through the lens and the perspective of a female filmmaker, which of course makes everything completely different. The interesting thing about the fact that she's actually stuck within a simulation and that her body is actually being manipulated and locked down by this other creepy ex-boyfriend, that it really unlocked in my mind all the different theories when it comes to different video game interpretations that one could have when it comes to how this world was actually built. So the Victory Project and Chris Pine as its president and creator. For example, I've read a lot of reviews which were criticizing all the different dream sequences, saying that it was something that had been overdone in the past when it comes to other horror films, and that they were not really convincing, and that it was the only interesting thing happening within the film itself. Otherwise, it would have been completely boring. I really like the dream sequences, mostly because most of them are not actually dream sequences. Since we are in a simulation, since we are in a weird virtual reality video game that kind of looks like the universe of The Sims, for example, it would make sense that there would be glitches. And this is exactly what starts the journey of our main character and why she starts recollecting things that link her to her actual life because of the glitches. And that's when she starts realizing that there is something wrong within the universe itself. Of course, The Matrix was really good at creating those kind of glitches that make you wonder whether you're actually living in a simulation or not. But there was never any doubt that The Matrix wasn't actually reality. Just because the Wachowski sisters always had a very specific color palette when it comes to The Matrix, so from an outside perspective, it was always clear that it was a simulation, a video game, and it was incredibly weird to be within it. And even the moments that Neo spends within the simulation itself, and as he believes that it is real life, are incredibly short when you think about it. We get out of the Matrix as fast as possible, and then we get in and out across the different movies. Because the idea behind Don't Worry Darling is that you would be stuck in a simulation without knowing that you're in it, but also it's not someone who is like farming you for electricity. It's not some big evil guy. It is literally your ex-boyfriend who wanted to spend as much time with you as possible and who actually believed that he could offer you a better life within the simulation, so he locked you inside of it. So the stakes are completely different, because I think that the theme when it comes to the patriarchal society and when it comes to everyday sexism work quite well, because we are facing a group of men who seem to be utterly and completely convinced that this is actually the best reality possible, not only for them but for their women as well. Harry Styles is kind of like the perfect character who tries to convince her of that as much as possible, and he seems to believe it himself as well. Every single day he says that he goes to work to earn enough money to pay for the simulation for her to basically do nothing for her entire life. Of course, this is not only an interesting theory when it comes to addressing the feminist spin of men controlling women's bodies, taking away their independence, and actually 100% genuinely believing that it is the best thing for them, but also the idea of capitalism. I feel like every single week, like recently I've been talking about capitalism, but all the films that I've been seeing lately have those inherent messages. So the idea that when you exist within a capitalist system, all you do is work all day long and come back home and spend a tiny few hours with your loved ones, and then you go back to sleep and then you repeat. And you do that until your retirement. And that is considered to be like a normal life. That's what everybody does. That's what everyone is forced to do if you want to survive and be successful within a capitalist system.
Now I'm depressed. Even more than I was.
And the funny thing is that by doing what he's doing, he's actually freeing her, so the main character, from the capitalist system, and he's allowing her to live a life without any kind of responsibility or any kind of job or any kind of link to capitalism itself. And of course, if you take the feminist reading, this is incredibly bad because she has nothing to do but take care of the house, going and take care of her own skin and making sure that basically she looks a certain way so that her husband will be happy. But I was kind of intrigued by the idea that from his perspective, he's trying to free her from the capitalist system.
If you live like that, do you know what people think about you?
People think that I'm someone mental. They don't know I'm very sentimental.
He's not necessarily only trying to dominate her, and that was why I thought that the message was nuanced enough to be interesting and to feel new as well. That is one of the main criticisms that I've seen online, that this movie is saying nothing new when it comes to criticizing the patriarchy, criticizing the way that men behave and that incels behave when it comes to women, and that they want to go back to a 50s idyllic society where they had control over the house, they had control over their wives, and control over everything basically, from their work to their personal life. But I feel like that is a theme that is mostly explored in real life as well, as we're discussing on Twitter, as we're discussing on Instagram about these kind of issues and the way that the world keeps changing and evolving. But I can't really think of any other movies which have actually addressed this specific problem here, but has also managed to have the entire package. So good performances, a strong cinematography, really strong sound design, because this movie has an incredible soundtrack, which reminds me of other movies like Midsommar or other movies made by A24, which rely on using breath and making basically weird sounds with your voice. Things like he's here, woohoo to our leader, such a beautiful head. Which funny enough are musical themes which keep repeating over and over again and keep increasing the tension when it comes to how we feel about the narrative. But they also work quite well because it is the most simplistic type of soundtrack, type of sound design that you could make, and that really relates to the individual, to the sound that any kind of human being could make, as I actually proved like a couple of seconds ago. I want to go back once again to the glitches I was talking about before, and I want to specifically talk about the scene in the dancing studio where basically our main character, played by Florence Pugh, stops dancing in unison with everyone else and looks at her own reflection in the mirror and sees that something is wrong. So there is a glitch. And it's really funny how when you apply video game theory to this movie here, you kind of realize that everyone else is kind of behaving like NPCs, so non-playable characters. And since they are unable to see the glitches, they're also unable to basically escape that reality. And of course, remember actually anything about their real life. And when you think about that, it kind of clicks in your head and you start thinking about all the different themes about moving in unison and being a cohesive group. That's what actually makes you happy, through conforming with everyone else and basically leaving the individual behind and trying to act as a single community instead of a single person who is devoted to a specific life and who wants to be able to do whatever she wants in her life. And it's really interesting that when you start to actually wonder about which characters could be NPCs and which characters would actually be the main characters who are manipulated by men, or which characters actually chose to be there. For example, the Olivia Wilde character, it is revealed that she chose to be in the simulation and that she remembers everything about her real life, and that's mainly because she wanted to be with her children who apparently died in some sort of way. I feel like this is one of the only limitations when it comes to the film here, is that we don't really get a nuanced look at every single couple and what their maybe tensions are, because at the end of the day we also have this impression that there are no problems within the couples themselves. But when you think about the feminist message, when you think about talking about the patriarchy and talking about men wanting to dominate women in every kind of facet of their lives, I'm pretty sure that there would be some really sadistic men who would be violent and who would be physically and psychologically aggressive towards their wives, even within this universe here, just because they can do it. And I feel like that is one thing that they didn't really explore. They give us the impression that every single husband actually treats their wives in a nice way, and that kind of takes away something from the nightmare that they're living. And of course, the idea that we don't really know who chose to be there and why they chose to be there. And that is something that could have been explored if they had maybe a couple of more minutes when it comes to the runtime, or if maybe they kind of gave up on a loop or two. There is, for example, a moment when she's starting to remember, we started to get close to the final act, and basically her memory is wiped once again, and we kind of repeat the same narrative threads once again to prove that she's been brainwashed and everything is going back to normal. But that's not what actually happens at the end of the day. I feel like they could have reworked the script a little bit to push in those kind of nuanced looks at different couples, so that we knew that not everyone was actually being nice within the universe there. And then we would get to understand a lot of different versions of toxic masculinity, and not a very specific one which is just relying on Harry Styles' performance.
Dr. Collins prescribed you a suite of medications which you were clearly not taking. The question is why?
He's lying to us. He's lying to all of us.
Alice, Bunny, your best friend, is worried about you. She thinks that you need help. Is that why she's not here tonight?
There are a lot of people who couldn't really believe that Harry Styles could be so creepy and toxic, but I actually did. I think they did a really good job when it comes to the production design, the costumes, and the looks when it comes to having a different beard, having a different haircut. I really liked how they handled the reveal as well. It doesn't really feel like a plot twist as much. It feels like you're stuck as well within the universe itself and you want to escape as well. Maybe one thing that I would have enjoyed a little bit more is having more gore or having more horrific elements part of the plot itself. I feel like that would have attracted a lot of horror fans as well, because at the end of the day this movie really stays on that safe line of being a psychological drama. With a tiny bit more, it could have been like one of the best horror movies of the year, without a doubt. One of the very little frustrations that I have with this movie would have to be linked to its final few scenes, so to its ending, and the idea that we're not really shown any other of the women escaping the simulation, and we're not actually shown if any of those women are actually being kept captive as Florence Pugh's character is. And I feel like that is the moment where Olivia Wilde should have expanded the universe of this film here to make sure that the feminist message didn't really rely just on one character, but it relied on everyone else as well. Of course, I see how this could have turned the movie into a weird science fiction action movie where Florence Pugh's character maybe vows to go and save all the different women stuck in the simulation, and trying to bring the company down. It would have been a bit cliche, it would have been a bit weird. So at the end of the day, I do like the way they decided to end it, but I would have preferred if maybe they showed just a couple of seconds of other women waking up, for example, from the simulation in some sort of ways, so that we would get a glimpse of what they were doing in real life. One of the best scenes in the movie itself is the conversation that Florence Pugh has when she's invited all of her friends for dinner, and she's invited Chris Pine's character as well.
We met on a train
to Boston. Yeah.
Yes.
You dropped your ticket, and he bent down, picked it up, gave it to you, right? It is, yeah. That's how Margaret met Ted. And Peg, am I right in thinking that that's how Debbie McIntyre met her husband? Yes, I am. That's how they met.
I'm really sorry that I keep referring to the actors' names. I'm just really bad when it comes to first names, so that's why I always go back to the actors and actresses. But anyways, I really like that scene because that is where she's trying to make everyone notice the glitches within their simulation, and the idea that everyone met actually in exactly the same ways, or different versions of the same story told to different people. It's kind of fascinating because you start to see the script behind every single relationship and every single couple. You realize that this scene could actually have been placed in any kind of romantic comedy movie that we've seen in the last 20 years maybe, and it would have worked perfectly, because those are the romantic stories that we like to hear, we like to be told, and they're very often that women like to hear when it comes to romance movies and when it comes to romantic comedies. That's why it's really interesting to have that twist where Florence Pugh is the one who is actually pointing out all the different wrongs when it comes to the different backstories that they've been told, even though they sound like the versions of reality that we want to hear as audiences ourselves. And I think this is mainly why this movie works so well, because even if you take out all the 50s Pleasantville looking scenarios and locations, at the very core of this film there is a really weird romantic comedy in between Florence Pugh and Harry Styles, who desperately want to be happy and want their relationship to work, and the whole idea that women are told that romantic love is supposed to be the priority in your life, and that at the end of the day you can actually give up your career, you can give up your idea of individuality, you can give up your idea of personal development just for that romantic love, so that the couple can move forward and so that it can work. And I love that this movie actually deconstructs that idea when, for example, Florence Pugh is talking about the fact that she loved her work, even though she didn't have a time for herself, even though she didn't get much sleep, even though she didn't have time to spend with the boyfriend. She still would rather go back to her being in charge of her own life instead of romantic love and love being the center of her life and the only thing that is important to her and the only thing that defines her as a person. And I think that it's a really important message that we need to hear, and I'm pretty sure that's also why romantic comedies as a genre has kind of died down in the last few years, mostly because I feel like with the new generations women have been changing their priorities, women have been taking a stand and being individuals, which is something that men have been allowed to do for centuries, and now it's their time, and this is what this movie is about. So it really sucks when I hear people saying that I'm not gonna watch it because of this controversy, or I don't like it because it looks like other movies which have dealt with these themes over and over again. It really sucks. I really recommend Don't Worry Darling, and I really think that you will enjoy it.
Okay, I love you. Bye-bye.
Let me know down in the comments what you thought about Don't Worry Darling, and if you liked it as much as Booksmart.
Not the cemetery or the penitentiary. Damn, my contemporaries, I'm too legendary. It's so money.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single like that you drop will go to Florence Pugh because she's been having an incredible career lately, and I want to reward her efforts, and also because she hasn't been treated really fairly when it comes to the backstage stories going on with this movie here, and we should look beyond that because she's incredible in this movie and we should go and see it just because of her. I'm Patrick and this is Torn Apart.
Something sinister going on underneath, and I think that kind of comes through in everything in the film, and we had such brilliant set design. Da, 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 da.
Da 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 da.